Hey everyone, just want to encourage you to find us on your listening platform and give us a rating. Anywhere you listen to that has a rating system, go on over and give us a rating and maybe leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts. These ratings really do help. Thank you so much for listening. On to this week's episode. So, Rolando, I know how you feel about certain genres of film. I know how you feel about musicals. I know how you feel about westerns, right? You don't really like them.
Right.
I know you like comedies better. But I don't really
Yes.
know your thought on a genre, or shall we say subgenre, that's actually one of the strongest out there, especially when it comes to contenders for dramatic films. It's the war film. What are your thoughts on war films?
I'm indifferent.
Mm.
I don't have like an opinion because I don't gravitate towards them, but if I watch them, I tend to like them. I guess it depends on the film.
So you're open to watching them, but not like dying to watch them or like repelled by them. It's just, sure, let's see how this film, does what it does.
If I'm forced to watch a film because my friends want to watch a war film, then sure, I will watch it.
Okay.
I'm never going out of, like, 1917 is a great example. No desire to watch that movie. All my friends wanted to see it in theaters, and I was just like, I guess. And I liked it.
You liked it, okay.
Dunkirk is another one where I had not one desire of seeing this film. And when it came out, it was just like, okay, it was good, but I forgot about it.
Those are two great films for you to bring up too, because I think that they're really like shaping how we're doing war films now. But for me, war films are films that I respect, but I don't love in the sense where I don't really rewatch a lot of war films. And war films are tricky because the moment you get this weird sense of either propaganda or patriotism in there, I feel uncomfortable. And here's a film based on a book that we're going to talk about today, two films, that is known heavily for its pacifist themes and its anti-war message, which is All Quiet on the Western Front. And there are three versions, but we're only covering two today. We're going to be covering the 1930 film that won Best Picture, and we're covering now the Netflix Academy Award nominated film from 2022, In Westen nicht Neues, which is All Quiet on the Western Front. So let's get...
Did you really have to say it in German?
I practiced it for 15 minutes straight, so yeah.
The eye roll I just gave.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Rolando.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast
about
unoriginality.
Have you ever heard of like All Quiet on the Western Front? Did you know it was a book? Did you know about the movie? Had you seen it in like film school?
Actually, I had to read excerpts of the book for one of my history classes in high school.
Oh,
I guess
wow.
whichever one really covers World War One, and because it kind of overlapped with like the English lit section, right? So we were reading. Yeah, because I remember, we read that one. That's also where we had to read, I think we may have read the full, then, when we move on to World War II, we read a couple of books from the World War II era, specifically the Diary of Anne Frank, for example.
Yeah.
But that's World War II. We're talking World War One, which...
two completely different perspectives book-wise, like one about a soldier in the trenches and one about someone, who's forced into isolation because of the way that they're being discriminated against. Really, really different thematic things there going on with the war. Now, I have a question to pose overall is, do you feel like you're educated well on World War One in general?
Actually, because of watching these films, I kind of had to go back and I know Franz Ferdinand, prior to watching
Archduke Ferdinand, yeah.
But if you had to ask me, what was the war about? It's just okay, well, there were the, it was, what was it? It was the Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Empire, and Germany. Duh. We didn't say Germany. Germany.
That's okay. There we go.
They are considered the, and the Americans, as Americans, we joined the war eventually, after the sinking of Lusitania, right?
Yes.
So I know the little tidbits, but in retrospect, I don't know really much about the political ramifications of the war outside of what we've seen in movies, and usually in films, what we do see and that kind of gets preached is like, oh, we're the good guys and stuff. But as you like do research into this, it's just like there were no good guys.
No good guys.
Like there were no heroes in this war.
Yeah. And I mean, good for you for knowing a lot more, I think, than like the average person does. And if you compare it to what an average person knows about World War II, it's a lot of people know a lot about World War II. We know who fought, we know why we fought, we know the ramifications, and we kind of have a clear understanding of like there was kind of a good and a bad side going on somewhat.
Although even that gets muddy when you think about...
Even that gets muddy, absolutely.
Because, we think, we sided with Stalin, but Stalin was also a genocidal maniac.
Yes.
So,
and we did terrible things. We also had concentration camps, right? So it gets really muddy. But, a big part of that, though, is because of media, right? Like, let's say journalism. Journalism was not up to the standard that we know it to be during World War I. So a lot of Americans weren't getting properly, in quotation marks, educated about what was going on. Whereas when World War II happened, journalism was at pretty much like the peak that we understand journalism now in terms of how it reports the news. And then we had film, we had radio. So we had this way of getting information out. And I'm bringing this up too, because films are kind of a really important educational thing for people to go to and to learn about things. But at the same time, we have to be wary because films can be showing us one side of a story, or they can be giving us their opinion of a matter. And when it comes to war, that can be particularly tricky. So historically speaking, All Quiet on the Western Front, it's based on a book. We're not going to talk too much about the book. We're going to talk about the films as always. But it was written by Erich Maria Remarque in 1928. And he was a soldier who fought in the Second Company of World War I. This book was banned in Germany, and copies of it were burnt by German people. So, it has a troubled relationship within its own country.
Well, that's because of obvious Adolf Hitler and the Nazi rise to power. They viewed this book as a threat, especially since this is an anti-war book.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the power of literature and ideas, being transferred around in our media. But it became a huge hit internationally, which is why Americans were the first to adapt this film. The title is literally translated as Nothing New in the West. But when the translator took it and brought it to English, he chose All Quiet as kind of like a different, more poetic way, of saying, things haven't changed, stagnation, all that stuff. But yeah, it had a sequel called The Road Back, which is pretty much after war, them going back, and they did turn it into a film. But we're just focusing on their time in the Western Front, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So the first film was directed by Louis Milestone, who we've covered one of his films on this podcast before. I wonder if you could just take a random guess as to what film he might have directed.
All right, so this is a 1930s film. Is it
expand past the 30s?
Oh, it has to be okay. So that's what I was trying to see. It was like it has to be.
It's like his second to last films, actually.
So. Cheaper by the Dozen.
No. That's a very good guess. He directed the original Ocean's 11.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So, which is not a very good film.
I mean, in retrospect, no. No, like not. That's a terrible movie.
This is one of his last films, and by then I think most directors with their last films are kind of checked out. But I think All Quiet on the Western Front is a good example of a Louis Milestone film. Like I said, this film won Best Picture when it came out. It was, won a critical acclaim. And it's always kind of been held in high esteem. I think it's in the 100 AFI, American Film Institute's best films of all time. It's highly regarded as a very good war film, anti-war film. But, it's an English language film. And this takes place in Germany. They did a television adaptation in 1979 by Delbert Mann, which was also very well received, even though we're not covering that today. The big comparison we're going to do is to this now German language rendition of this German book with the Netflix film All Quiet on the Western Front. Rolando and I agreed that because these films are so similar, that we're going to pretty much talk about the stories and talk about the different way that both films approached them. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be kind of like the way we're going to go about today's podcast. So we are introduced to our main character, Paul Baumer, pretty early in both films in different ways, but pretty much, it starts before the war. Well, actually, the second film begins with a cold opening of like just a scene of war, and it immediately throws you in to the trenches, literally. What did you think about that? Actually, opening up with that.
I actually preferred it because of the way they do the storytelling there, in which we follow we know his name, Heimlich or Heimler or something. The second kid, and we're seeing him. He gave up his life for the war, and then how immediately almost forgotten he becomes. Right, like they take his uniform, and like wash it and resew it up, and so we were following this nameless soldier. Not saying we know his name, but we were following him, and then that uniform gets handed over to Paul, which is like kind of the dark. Which I was just like, oh, this is going to be gruesome. Oh, guys, by the way, unusual for me, but I watched this in the correct order.
Wow, look at that.
Yes.
Yes, it is a very visual opening in the sense where it's quiet after after the very loud scene of war, when you're watching, what happens to the uniform and how it pretty much gets recycled to the next soldier, the replacement soldier of the second company. It's like, oh shit, all these people are replaceable. Like war takes no prisoner. I mean, what's that saying? War takes no
prisoners.
Is it that? I don't know. It's like pretty much like you don't matter. And it's a harsh reality to begin the film with, but it is effective in that sense. And then we meet Paul and his group of friends who are very eager to join. Now, in the original film, we see soldiers parading through the streets. People have this general like, rah, 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 this is a just war, we support our troops throughout the town. And then we go into a classroom where a teacher is giving a very passionate speech about why you should be a patriot and fight this war. And he's getting his students riled up. And this is how we meet the students in the original film. And we see how these words are affecting them and their idealizations of what it is to be a soldier and what it is to be part of this war. Mm-hmm. And I actually loved that in comparison to how they handled it in the 2022 film, because in the 2022 film, they're all kind of like on stairs. And it's just like they're listening to him talk and they're like, yeah, exciting. But then it's like, that's it. We don't really have too much time spent with the boys.
Yeah, I actually prefer it in the 2022 version because, well, I guess they're trying to achieve, I mean, we're Paul, while being the same, it's still the character is slightly different in both films. In the first one, he's more idealistic and stuff, where in this one, I get more so the sense that he's kind of like, well, I guess he is also idealistic in the new one. The only thing is,
I would say like so, yeah.
His family.
We dwell on it more in the original.
Is it that we dwell on it more? It's different. I guess it's just portrayed differently, right? Like we don't even get his interaction with his family, for example, in the new one. We just kind of skip over that. We skip the training too.
Yeah, which I actually have a problem with. But before we get there, I think for me, I guess the original film spends more time trying to establish the characters and also trying to establish why they are fighting in the first place. In the 2022 film, when they're listening on the stairs, it's like a 2-minute sequence. But in the 30s film, it's a much longer sequence because I think you have to understand, the sense of what the people who weren't fighting, how they felt about the war, and why these kids volunteered. These are volunteers and these are kids out of school. These are 16, 17 years old. So I feel like you understand that more because of the time spent in the 30s film than the time that they give it in the 20s film. And the 20s, the 2022 film. We technically are in the 20s. So.
I mean, I suppose, so I guess maybe that, I don't know, maybe the 1930s one, just I feel like it's like kind of like spoon feeding it to you, right? Where this one, the kids are already brainwashed by the society that they live in.
Yeah, so you just mentioned a big difference between the two films that either you'll accept about it or not. The first film is a 1930s film, so it's going to be a little bit more melodramatic. The new film is way more naturalistic, and it's actually less dialogue driven, but it's like trying to provide, like a very natural feeling. In the 30s, it was more theatrical. It was just a different way of how they told their stories. And also the script tended to be a little bit more on the nose with what they were trying to convey, and very like theatrical characters would go into like these random little mini monologues and whatnot. Very just a completely different time period. Like this 1930s film was 92 years ago, different way that they told the film. Mm-hmm. So that's either going to be something that you accept about the fact that this is a different time period, or you don't? For the listener, I guess for you, Rolando, was it a turnoff for most of the movie? Like, oh my gosh, why is this so melodramatic?
Yes, obviously.
I figured, yeah. So you didn't
Obviously.
accept it for being a
No, I
product of
mean,
its
I could
time.
like still accept it for its look. It's a war movie from the 1930s. It's in black and white.
What's your
Technological
point?
I'm just saying it's a technological. I think there were technological achievements that were clearly present in the filmmaking here. But
Absolutely.
was I
Well,
bored at
before we,
times?
all right,
Yes.
so before we get to that, and actually, I will say that I felt like both films were too long. Let's just say that. I feel
The
like both
original
of
one's
these
supposed to
films
be
were too
longer
long.
because we got the Library of Congress edit. The original
No,
one.
the new film
No,
is
no, no. The original
longer.
film is 155 minutes. I don't think anyone has seen it since before World War II because it got edited so many times to like
It did
appease
get
other
edited, yes.
markets that I think the only one that it remains in the Congress was 122 minutes.
Yeah,
122.
so
Yeah. So
talking about different time periods and too, and a perfect example of this is going to be Gone with the Wind. Whereas when film was new, especially like 1930, feature length films were less than 10 years old as an art form. So by adapting a book, they didn't really know, like they were still getting used to how to adapt it. So a lot of these early book adaptations are going to be more literal than say a newer one with is. And in this 2022 film takes many liberties with the book. So here's a big difference, right? The 1930s film, very faithful to the book. So, I mean, I've never read it. The 2022 one takes a lot of liberties, which, some people are like, hey, that's the art of adaptation. You take what works for the medium, you take what doesn't work. So, another big thing that we got to address.
right.
Okay. So, the other reason why I think the original opening scene is good is because it foreshadows something that comes in the later film, which does not happen, which comes later in that film, which doesn't happen in this new Netflix film. So, I guess you had to spend more time in the classroom in the beginning because when he returns to the
Oh,
classroom,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's
okay.
fine. You could spoil it. The movie is like almost 100 years old at this point.
Well, for people who want to see the new film, but okay.
Well, it's not
So,
in the new
big
film though,
difference.
so
Well, yeah, good point. Okay, big difference between the next two films is that the original film has a training sequence. And the next film, they're just thrown into war. We don't have any idea of how they got there. And I guess, do you feel like we should have had a sense, or do you feel like it was more because also we're talking about war and we're talking about a real war and about what real soldiers went through. So you are kind of like looking to this film to educate you in some ways. And according to the 2022 film, they're just dropped in with no training.
I would so I think this is what I was more fascinated about while watching both these films. It's just like this war is over 100 years old at this point, right? Like I think everyone, or if not, majority of people who were alive during that war are dead now.
Yes.
That war, as far as we're concerned, is now like in the history books only. So all we could rely on are the historical artifacts that remain, which is the letters the soldiers wrote and first-hand accounts that are still in existence. With that said, I think it allows creators to be almost callous in how we portray that war. In this sense, like saying it's just like look at these poor dumb kids who just signed up for this war. They don't even get training; they just get sent into the
Yep.
war. Me who doesn't have necessarily the finest grasp of history, am very much inclined to believe it's just like, yeah, we were barbaric back then. I believe it. Like, and it's from the German point of view, and the German they needed soldiers. So
Mm-hmm.
like it wasn't that implausible for me to believe that they wouldn't have had training, or the training would have been so minimal that it's like not worth the screen time.
Yeah, no, good, well said. I do think that removing the training sequence is actually doing an injustice, or at least like for people who are looking to be, and this is also not just the film's fault, this is also an audience's fault, but it's like, just don't take everything you see for fact and like question things. And in the original film, we have a character of Himmelstas. And Himmelstas was the postman in their town. And when they see that he's now kind of like their trainer, they're like, hey, it's Himmelstas, Himmelstas. But Himmelstas takes his position very seriously and is
Mhm.
he's power tripping. And he abuses these kids to the point where, they rebel against him actually. And they like punish him their last night there, which I actually thought was a really satisfying sequence because I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with Himmelstas? But it also shows you, what the idea of being a soldier does to a person's brain. It's like this weird sociological thing that happens where it's like, I have the power, you must respect me, and all this stuff. And this comes into play in different ways in both films, but I thought Himmelstoss is a really good representation of that in the first film, because when Himmelstoss turns later in the film, they do not respect him anymore. War has done so much damage that like none of these, what it is to be like the roles we play in society, the norms that we go about and stuff. None of that shit matters anymore. They've been to fucking war. Like, well, who are you trying to be, Himmelstoss? Trying to make us stand and salute you? Like, fuck you. So like that difference of how war has changed them with this character, and how in the beginning they do everything he says, but by the end, they laugh at his face. And we see that indeed there is training happening for these soldiers.
And he's already disillusioned right from the get-go. Like, yes. So, I mean, I guess maybe that's also why I kind of prefer the 2020 version. It's just like, he's disillusioned already from the training. Like, which is just
interesting, because then story-wise, there's no beats that get you there. He's just, bam, he's there. And then we stay on that beat for 2 more hours. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that kind of exhausting?
I mean, I guess, yeah. As opposed to like the other one, like in the new one, it's just like, well, that makes sense why he would be like miserable. Like, we're fucking, like, I think one of his friends dies like almost immediately getting off, the train. No.
The harsh realities of war hit them like that in the
I'm laughing, but I shouldn't
in
be,
the second film. Yeah.
Now you're
yeah,
laughing,
like
and you shouldn't.
I'm laughing at you, Rolando. So in the 2022 Netflix film, there's 4 of them, as opposed to in the original, I think there's like 6 of them. And one of them with glasses, his character has glasses because you see a visual motif that comes later, but he is so petrified by being in one of the like little areas. What is that called?
The trenches?
Yeah, they're like in a boxed in trench, which also, historically, being in the trench was the safest place to be in that war. So it's interesting that that's actually what killed him. Like, literally, they step out.
The safest place to be would be the generals, like miles away from the war zone.
Well, we're talking from a soldier's point of view. But it's so interesting because then after they come out of that little, boxed in area, they see all these dead bodies there. And it's just like, really? Like, was it so easy to kill them in the trenches? Because then why were the trenches effective? It's just like from a historical point of view, you're wondering, like, was it that easy for this many dead people, like dead bodies to, populate in the trenches like that? Because again, this film is made 100 years after this war, and it's trying to put forward historical facts to us. So we have to question, like, wow, was it that easy to be killed just like that in the trenches, like this 2022 film is telling us? Because the 1930s one didn't tell us that. So, and I hate to be like such a historian about it, but it's kind of our duty to. With war, we have to take in like historical accuracy and entertainment at the same time. Like, yes, things will be stretched and things will be more theatricized for film, but also you are kind of putting forth a theory about how this war worked to me, and I have to take your word for it, or I should actually just question it. So,
well, hang on, is that the medium's fault that you have to take these things into? As like what's it called, as reality now, or
yeah, I'm talking about an audience member. I guess but it's also kind of a it's push and a shove. It's like they should not be lying to me, but I should also be aware of the fact that I'm watching a film, not a documentary.
I believe all films have that stipulation in the end saying like all these are fake and anything that might be true is not. I forgot what the actual Rasputin.
All the way at the end credits where people are gone from the theater and stopped watching, or Netflix already put on Emily in Paris for them. Yeah. But unfortunately, we know how people work.
Yeah, we do know. I mean, but I don't know if that's the film. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, again, push and shove. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So whatever. Okay. The scenes of war in both films are highly impressive. Highly impressive. Now, the 1930s film, I feel like, really set the standard. Like, after they accomplished what they did in the 1930s with that war set and the way that they, showed what it was like to be in the Western Front. I mean, that set the standard for films ever since, Mm-hmm. Like, that was high cinematic art. And I think both of these films did a really good job in portraying their war sequences. Particularly the new film has very good audio editing and an impactful soundtrack, which is literally just boom. Because nowadays that's what scores are.
That's so funny. That was my main complaint for this film. I didn't necessarily like the music.
The music, yeah. So the music was kind of like, after a while, I was like, okay, yes, I get it. I thought the audio editing was excellent.
Yeah, the audio editing is fine, but like the music, I thought was like kind of just like, I was just like, it doesn't fit. It felt more like a German rock song or something, like just like maybe about to start playing.
So funny you said that, because the composer of the film said his influence was Led Zeppelin.
Oh. I
so
see it, but it's just like, but it was a little weird. Maybe because you're watching historical movies sometimes. It's not like the Baz Luhrmann film Elvis, where we have all of a sudden hip hop dropping while we're watching Elvis, right? That is a stylistic creative decision. I mean, yes, you can make the argument that this is a stylistic creative choice that they made. I don't know if I agree with it. In my opinion,
you don't know if you got down with it.
It's unsettling. It was unsettling for sure, because it made that opening sequence where Heimler is his remains and his uniform are being carried over, like kind of much darker, but still, I don't know if I needed it throughout the whole film. It just felt out of place, in my opinion.
Yeah, after a while, it was like, I get it,
but I also don't know what
give me something different.
I don't know what music from the 1910s sounds like. So I mean, did we want to?
Charleston? Well,
I don't think so.
That was probably the 20s, but so the thing about the 1930s film is that there's not really a score. There's like, we're just living in this movie, so we're not like, there's not music constantly playing throughout it. And they kind of chose that direction, minus the whole, like the bong that's happening throughout the film, because I think that's also like a stylistic choice that a lot of these new composers are making, like, Hans Zimmer when he does Nolan and Villeneuve movies, which is like taking sounds that you would register as like real life noises, but passing it off for music. So I feel like, okay, they chose that approach because it's a war film from the 1910s. So, but after a while, for me, I guess it was like, I get it. I agree with you. But audio editing is excellent and might win the Academy Award for that. So we'll see. Okay. So Paul and his friends start dying. It's as simple as that. They also befriended an older soldier who was part of the first company called Cat. Mm-hmm. Cat is famous for being able to get them food, right? So in the original film, he just like casually steals a pig off of a train and brings it back to his family, his troop. They are kind of like a family. But in the new film, there's a farmer that they keep like harassing. And that's the thing. I didn't really kind of understand the logistics of where they were going, but it wasn't the most important thing, but whatever. Wait. They kept like, where was this farm and how were they being able to get to it? I guess because
I think it's the civilians and stuff, and they had a
well,
farm,
that's the thing. In the 1930s film, you're either you're back or you're on the front, and you keep getting called back to the front. But they didn't establish that that's how it worked in the 2022 film, unless I missed that.
I can't say for sure because. Yeah, I honestly don't know how World War I works.
And that's the thing. Like, I got a sense of like how things worked better in the 1930s film. Like, okay, so they're on their camp, and then they get called to the front every so often, and sometimes they get leave. Right? He gets a leave. I didn't understand any of that in the 2022 film. They were, as far as I was concerned, they were constantly in the trenches. But then they sometimes weren't. I was like, so where are they? How does this work? I guess I just had like questions in terms of me being curious as to how the war worked, but maybe I'm the only one, and maybe it doesn't matter. But he's harassing a farmer, and he keeps stealing their goose so that he could feed, his troop.
Yeah, his friends.
And Kat is probably the most other prominent character in this film other than Paul. I think Kat in both films works. I think Kat is probably the strongest actor in the original film, but the difference is because they're all very melodramatic. It is what it is, right? Like sometimes you roll your eyes at it in the 1930s film, so whatever. But he's not. He's the most naturalistic in my opinion, and that's because he's much older than them in the original film, and you get the sense where like this second company, really these volunteers were kids who were kind of lied to about the glories of war and like told to go out there, and now here they are, and they're like, why am I here? And they're like losing their minds, literally. In the second film, I feel like he was closer in their age group, so he was kind of like
he looked like maybe like 5-6 years older than everybody.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily like kill anything for me. It's just it's a difference, and I guess that whole like these young kids volunteering for war was more prominent in me when I watched the 1930s film. But I think their relationship worked in both films.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess casting wise, though, again, I think it makes more sense that I don't know. Would someone so old really be such a survivor? Well, also, well, hang on. How about this? I'm saying it's just like what I'm trying to say is just like the odds of someone being that old and still alive in the war.
Well, how old was he?
I
don't really know.
Well, that's the other thing I was gonna say. Is like in the
like
1910s, like 1910s, 40s is probably like 2020s, like 50. Like
for men,
like
or
looking
for women?
at like looking like in your 20s, you probably look like 50 now. Does that make sense? Like back then. It was a hard life in the 19. Well, this is movies from the 1930s.
But hard. It was a hard life, but you had to be even harder the older you got. So
yeah.
By that logic, I mean, who knows? We can't speak to that, but I think it worked. In the second film, he's illiterate, and there's this nice scene there where he gets a letter from his family, and Paul has to read it to him, and he finds out a little bit more about who Kat was. So like, there's this character building.
Wait, that was Paul he was shitting next to?
Yeah, that was Paul.
I thought that was someone else.
Yeah.
Weird. Like, I guess because of the uniform, it also looked different. Like he was from a different. I thought he was a Frenchman or something. And also, his face looked so much more gaunt.
No, that was Kat. He had the mustache.
No. I know that was.
Oh, Paul. Yeah,
I'm talking about Paul.
Yeah.
Paul.
No, that was definitely Paul.
Okay.
That was them building their relationship in the film. The one thing that the second film did was that it minimized the friend group. So there was 4 that came together, and then 3 that got killed the first night. So now it's like really, I mean, 1 that got killed the first night. So it's down to 3 plus Kat, and then Chajin or something. Whereas like there's a bunch of them in the first film. So sometimes you're like, wait, which one's that? Which one's that?
Right.
So in the second film, one of them spends a night off with a French civilian, and he brings back a scarf that kind of becomes a motif passed from soldier to soldier. Another one steals a picture off of like a poster, a building of a woman, and that he like puts on his trench, like, like this is what he wants to go home for. And now the way he dies
was gruesome.
Yeah, but also made me think, I did not see, is that historically accurate?
Yep, that is. So poison gas and flamethrowers are staples of World War I for sure.
Crazy.
That I know.
He dies by a flamethrower, guys.
I remember that from listening to Radiolab and stuff, and like the brutality that was World War I is, awful. Stuff.
Absolutely! It ruined a generation.
But flamethrowers were a thing. I think the reason you don't see them in the 1930s film is probably because like I don't think we understood how to do like stunts like that. No.
Well, there was this shot in the 1930s film because they're in the trenches, but they have these wires in front of them, and the French soldiers are trying to advance on them. One of them approaches the wires, a grenade goes off, and then all you see left of him are his hands on the wires. That was astonishing when I saw that. Now, obviously, in the 2022 film, we get that times 1,000 to the point, like, you see so much blood. You see so many people's heads explode. You see so much death that after a while, you kind of get desensitized to it. It kind of feels like a video game.
Kind of. You mean like how soldiers had to feel like, you mean?
But that's the thing, like, when it becomes so one note and you're trying to get a message across, you have to give it a balance so that people don't start rejecting it, right? Because the film was incredibly repetitive, this 2022 Netflix film, in terms of its scenes of war. It doesn't show what a lot of the original film does. It doesn't balance things out, because I don't know if maybe you don't agree with me, but it's like if you're constantly beating a dead horse with a message, does a person take that message after a while, or does it escape them, or do they reject it?
So there were, in the 2022 version, there were basically, I think, 2 major instances of like the actual carnage and stuff. And they happened, I would say, in the second half of the film. Right? Yeah, in the first half, we have like one bloody battle, but the second half is once we start getting the flamethrowers and stuff, and then we see the countdown basically happening, which makes like the ending much more tragic, in my opinion. I think, I don't know if I was necessarily desensitized, because like for me the balance comes in with the introduction of these new characters, the commanders, the ones that are trying to negotiate peace, and this
Yes,
war,
which did not exist in the book.
right?
They threw
But
that in there for the
I
new
think it
film.
was probably the strongest part of this film that
It
makes me
was well
prefer
done.
it here, at least because I have just what's it called? I don't gravitate towards war stuff, right? But excuse me for this clunky demonstration here, but like, sorry guys, I'm like working on a little sleep. But I just recently, Eddie and I had just recently finished Andor. And this show Andor, which is a revival of the Star Wars I forgot the movie, but it's one of those like prequel movies, but
Rogue
not
One.
Rogue One. Yes, thank you. So it's a prequel to Rogue One, but unlike any other Star Wars property, this is like the first time that we see like the actual Empire in its brutality. And more importantly, we also see the rebels in its brutality also. And one of the great things that the show did was like it kind of shows you the leaders of both sides and how unscathed they are with all the little skirmishes. So the little man is always paying the price, while the big guys are never hurt by the brutality of the war. This film did such a great job demonstrating that, because you had so much of the leadership still ready to just like, fuck them, let them die. Like, I will until you sign this treaty. You had there was only one guy, the guy who's from the Marvel movies. I don't know his name, but that's all I know him from. He's like
Daniel Bruhl.
Yeah, Sergeant Van Doom. Thank you. But he is the only one who's trying to like save as many lives as possible. He's ready to lose the war because he knows at this point the Germans are just fighting for ego. But everyone around him is just like, no, we will like honor and all this shit that's like useless, right? And it just makes me so mad because like, if you really think about it, who were the bad guys of World War One? It's leadership. It was absolutely leadership and stuff that were the bad guys, that so many lives were lost.
And that's something that with 92 years later, this film brings into it. It's like all this hindsight and this message where it becomes more of a classist message too. Like, look at this poor leadership putting our civilians out there to die for no reason at all, not a noble cause, for nothing, especially with the ending, which I thought was also like, wow, they're just cranking it to not even 11, they're cranking it to 13. And that never historically happened. So I'm like, interesting creative choice they did.
Wait, what do you mean didn't historically happen? What?
The 15 minutes before the war ends, send the troops out to fight one more last time.
I've actually had heard a lot of instances of that happening, so I think that's actually...
Well, so that general is not real.
No. But the actual... How many people died right before, like, before the...
I mean, I'm sure people
announced.
did die right before everything was announced, but I think that the way, like, the whole situation as presented is either a complete fabrication or they took a lot of liberties with it. Mm-hmm. But... the original film does not have this classist thing to it. It's just more solely like, war sucks. Why did anyone fight in this war and more dies? It was a very pacifist film. We have to remember that the 1930s film was made in a time of pacifism. And pacifism is, in vogue in between wars. So this was between World War I and World War II. Mm-hmm. This new film, there's war, things have changed. 92 years later, things have changed. Our relationship to all these, to media representation of war and to war itself has changed and whatnot. And this is a different war. This is not a war. This war happened 100 years ago, whereas in the 1930s, it happened less than 10 years ago when that came out. So it's interesting because I wonder what this film's stance on war is. And I feel like... Okay, Pauline Kael. You know who Pauline Kael is?
No.
She was a film critic. And when in her review of the original film, she said, isn't it easy to be a pacifist when you're showing the side of the loser? Would anyone make a pacifist film if they were, showing RAF soldiers in World War II? Right? Like, okay. Royal Air Force.
Okay.
If you're showing the winning side, would you make a pacifist film, right? And it's almost so easy to get so caught into war is hell and war sucks when you fully are embracing the loser's side. Mm-hmm. War sucks when you lose, right? Can you think of any film about war sucks when people win? And I actually, I'm sure there exists. I just can't really think of any, which is why I wanted to ask you.
Hmm. Where the good guys, where our side.
We're on the winning side. We're on the quote just side. But it's a kind of anti-war pacifist film.
Yeah, I don't. I can't. As someone who doesn't really gravitate towards
watch war films. Yeah. But if you think about most war films too, like they also have this sense of patriotism. War is just,
totally.
Like I feel like Saving Private Ryan, the way that it ends in a very patriotic way, and different films and stuff. So I guess when I was watching this new film and like the way that they chose to end it, I was like, okay, I really feel like this film is not only anti-war, but it's anti-government. And I felt like it brought so much of that into the way that it held this new film, which, I mean, hey, whatever. I'm cool with the anti-government thing. But I feel like that's why it felt more like a video game. And when I say video game, I specifically don't mean like you're saying what it is to be a soldier. I don't think what it is to be a soldier in war feels like a video game, because in a video game, you're home, you're comfortable, you're just killing nonstop, and you get desensitized to violence, and you go on with your day. Mm-hmm. That's what watching this film felt like. It did not feel like actually being a soldier. And I actually feel like, for me at least.
Sure.
I'm not a soldier. I've never been to war. I don't know what it feels like. And I'm not saying the 1930s film gave me that better, but I saw more of like a balance, and I understood the mechanisms of at least what it was to be a soldier in World War I better than I did in this new film, because the new film was so focused on the violence and the brutality that it was extra. It was relentless. And I guess I wonder if that was the only way that they can convey this whole message that they have, which is not just anti-war, anti-classism, anti-government and stuff. Because also the guy who like sent them out 15 minutes, we're going to fight, is just such a cartoonish character, and they made him up. So it was like, why are we doing this? It's like, it was just so relentless at that point. I was like, this is a creative choice to like keep going.
Oh, it's also, I mean, well, film is spectacle now. Like,
yes, well, spectacle at the hands of I guess realism, which you should be both, right? You should be a balance of both.
I thought they did.
I definitely preferred the ending of the original film, and
which maybe, was kind of like slapped together.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like they what's it called? That ending. It wasn't the original ending. Like he shot it after the actors were already done. So you did like, that's why you only see the hand reaching for the butterfly. Yeah. I don't know. I think I prefer the new ending a little bit better, to be quite honest.
Well, the new ending, and maybe this is why you like it. It felt very
cinematic. It felt not just cinematic.
No, not just cinematic.
For me,
I felt like both endings were very cinematic.
It's mostly about yes, but I think for me, it's mostly about the idea of like, oh, these poor, they're just being sent to their death for nonsense, like for absolute, like it sucks. That count, just knowing that like it's going to end so soon, but like they're all going to die.
So both deaths of Paul at the end are redundant. They just happen in random times, right? And it's just like he's just going. But the second film, he has such an adrenaline rush, which I'm sure soldiers did, that he just killed a shitload of people, and then he gets stabbed in the back. Right. And he's also like on this killing rampage because Kat just died so randomly by the farmer's son, which I was like, okay, I guess, sure. But like I that actually did not, like I didn't think that was a good creative choice at all.
Oh, well,
because I thought it was so arbitrary that it was kind of like, you're not, this isn't actually adding to your commentary of what you're trying to say. This is taking away from it.
I don't think, well, I guess maybe we just take different things from me, because I don't think that Kat's death, because of the young kid, is arbitrary, right? Like I think a lot of this movie is about this whole idea of like the loss of innocence here. He died at the hands of a child, basically, but is it a just death? Like, same thing goes with World War I in general. Like, was this a just war, right? He was stealing from his family. The kid did something to defend his family. But guess what? He's also acting out on the fact that we're in war. You know what I mean? Every scrap of meat that you eat is something off of my plate that my family can't. You know what I mean? So like, it's just like, was it arbitrary? I don't know. Like again, it shows you the
Well,
senselessness
it's
of
arbitrary
war.
because he's a soldier, he's in war, and this is how he dies at the hands of a child.
Right.
He's not on the combat and stuff. So, like, in that
But
sense, yes, you can say, wow, that's how he died. Like, is that what they're going to say back to his family?
I mean, what do you say? I mean, you say,
yeah,
he was a thief and he
so
died.
that's why I take it as, like I was like, okay, an arbitrary death. Because Paul always, in both versions, he dies just so randomly, right? Like, it almost is like, how did it happen in the first film? More so. But I guess for me, the way that Paul dies is the big difference, because after he goes on this killing rampage and then he gets stabbed in the back, you kind of knew it was coming. Whereas in the original film, it was just a quieter moment of him actually like seeing something that he connected with, this butterfly, because he connected butterflies in his past life. And he just wanted to reach out and get it, but he's in war. So he makes himself vulnerable.
Yeah.
And visible, and because of that he dies. And it's just and that to me is like the ultimate, like, almost kind of like, wow, gut-wrenching death, because it's like you're actually trying to connect to who you were, and because of that, because of where you are, you get killed for it. But then it ends with this shot of a grave of cemeteries, and you see this the shot calls back to when they were first soldiers entering the second company. They're all like looking back on it on the camera, and you see the soldiers, and you see just the idea of like all of these soldiers who signed up and all of the pointless casualties that happened in this war gets really felt in that last shot. Whereas in the new film, they give us some statistics that are just as heart wrenching. But for me, I cinematically loved seeing that visually, because I understood what they were trying to say through that. And, I watched that film with my mother, and afterwards, like, first of all, she stayed awake for it, which is an accomplishment for a 1930s film, and my mom. But also, she was so quiet. I knew that, like, she got it. Like, she felt it, she felt what the film was trying to convey. Whereas she didn't actually watch the new film with me, but afterwards, I just kind of felt like, did Paul's death, did it hit me in the same way? For me, it did not. For me, it was almost too arbitrary. But also, if you're going to show me going, like, if you're going to show him going on a killing rampage before, then maybe I'm not going to feel like, damn it, Paul, I can't believe you just died that way. Because,
yeah.
I mean,
I guess that's a valid point. I would agree with you on that.
I just want to talk about one more sequence that was in both of them. To compare it, is when Paul kills a French soldier in one of those little dugout holes, and then he has to stay there while he watches this man that he just stabbed slowly die. Not just die, slowly die. Which sequence? Yeah, while he like goes through all these different emotions. Yeah. He goes through so many emotions. Which sequence do you think worked best for you?
I don't know. I think they both worked equally, because I kind of saw these almost back to back.
Yeah,
right?
They
like
both did work
color.
really well. Yeah. I do. One had color, yeah. They pretty much were the same. There was more added lines of dialogue, obviously, in the 1930s one, and Lou Ayres, not the strongest actor. But I guess for me, that was one of the sequences where I thought the new film really, really did it well. Because also with the advancements of acting and with audio, hearing him die was really prominent. And also before he kind of has a reversal where in the new film, he like puts mud down his throat and tries to get him to die. And then he feels bad. And then he like starts like trying to help him. And it to me, that rang really true. I just thought it was overall really successful.
Yeah. My favorite scene in the original, though, was when the guy, his legs were amputated and the soldiers are around
he
him.
wanted the boots.
They wanted the boots. I was just like, God, this fucking, it's like, we're so fucked as like a species.
Right?
You know what
I
mean?
Seriously. No, that was, that was a great sequence. The original film has Paul go on leave. He visits his family. He feels detached and disillusioned, like he can't function in normal society. And he goes back to the classroom of the teacher who encouraged him to join the war in the first place. And he's been in the war for years now. And he sees the kids that are now being given the same lecture, and they're all, drinking the Kool-Aid. They're all want to sign up. And the teacher's like, give them words of wisdom from the field. And he's pretty much like, don't fucking do it. And he says, when it comes to dying for your country, it's better to not die at all. It is a strong statement against patriotism, or a false sense of patriotism, and also against war. That like you, this is the scene why it probably got banned in Germany,
Right.
why why it's like considered also to be such a pacifist thing, because I feel like, you know, patriotism is such a strong notion throughout the entire world in so many countries, that when you hear such a anti-patriotic statement like that, like I feel like even today people would hear that and be upset by it. And of course the kids in the classroom call him a coward, call him a
Mm-hmm.
traitor, you know, they reject him. And it's just so accurate. And to me, like, I loved that scene. Now, of course, you know, some lines were on the nose and stuff, but it was like, this is the central message of what I think the book probably was and what this original film is, that kind of got lost in the 2022 film, because
Yeah.
it's also like, again, we only spent like 2 minutes on the stairs with that teacher, and then we never see him again, and Paul never gets back, you know, he just dies. So it's, yes.
Yeah, because I think the timing is different. Like you're right. I think the other one, it's he's been on the front lines for like a while. In this one, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like maybe not that long. Like
Yeah.
maybe this is literally like a month for in the life of this kid. You know,
Yeah.
and what a
Yeah.
shitty month. Uh,
Well, I think it's 18 months. At what point
18
there's like
is
18
that
months
was
later.
it?
Yeah.
I must have missed it
Yeah.
and stuff.
Oh my gosh. There was this one scene where we have like this wide shot of the soldiers. They're all there waiting in the trenches. And it's behind them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see that they're there in the trenches, and above them on the ground is the barbed wire.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then they start to attack, and the camera does a 180, and now we're in front of them. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? The barbed wire is gone, and it's now in back of them. Did you notice that when you were watching the film that happened?
In the new one?
Yeah, in the new one, because they're about to attack.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, wow, how are they going to attack with the barbed wire in front of them? A question that I had in the 30s film, but got answered because that's when the French soldiers advanced and then they had to defend themselves, right? But in the new film, literally, the barbed wire just disappears and is now in back of them, and they charge. And I was like, holy fuck. That is one of the biggest goofs I've ever seen in a film. And it's also kind of irresponsible.
Oh, I can't say
Of
I
how
noticed
it's
that.
like,
I gotta check it
yeah,
out.
I noticed that. You got to check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so overall, what do you think? How do you have a film that you prefer that hit the messaging overall for you? Like, you know, let's talk about,
and
I guess, as a
in
whole,
terms
the
of
two
maybe hitting the
films.
messages, because I think the original one beat that message over your head, right? Especially, you're right with with the scene with the professor, and he gets called a coward. But if I had to pick a movie that I preferred, it'd probably be the new one. I guess only because of those added scenes of seeing like the honchos and stuff, and like how not disillusioned, but how disconnected they are from the fact that their men are dying, and like how they're willing to keep sacrificing more lives, right?
Yeah.
I think the original black and white one, it did have some great shots, right? Like one of the shots that comes to mind is like this. I was curious as how they did it. You're filming from a window, and you're seeing these soldiers kind of going up the mountain and stuff. And it's like one of the earlier shots of the film. Just like, oh
Yeah.
wow, this is a
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful shot.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that the filmmaking techniques here in the new one weren't superb, because the director for the new film, he kind of wanted to do as many practical shots as possible. It wasn't a CGI fest, and it shows, which is a bold choice for a Netflix movie, because it's like, it's Netflix. Like,
Yeah.
but you know what? They got the Oscar nominations, so
Absolutely.
I guess he did something right.
I encourage our listeners to watch both films, honestly. I think you could take away things from both of them, and I think doing a compare and contrast of them is actually going to be beneficial for a viewer. I do prefer the original. I prefer the balance, and I just think that cinematically it had what I want from a film more. And I mean, do you think it's going to win any Oscars? Do you think it's going to win Best Foreign Language Film? I don't think it will win Best Picture, but
No, I don't think it'll win Best Picture, but it
might win Best Foreign.
what's it up against? I don't even know.
Argentina, 1985, Close, The Irish Girl, and one more. Maybe Triangle of Sadness also got double nominated. I'm not sure, but
Okay. I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know.
It's definitely going to win some tech awards, I think, and it would deserve it. This is like 75% of the films I watch. I wish I saw this in a theater, because it probably would have sounded good, but it sounded great on my surround sound, so at least I had that. So Just Rolando has nothing to say.
I have
Did I
nothing to say
freeze
about
or
that. No, you did not.
you didn't wish you saw it in the theater to hear it a certain way?
I don't.
See it bigger?
I don't know. It's like
maybe
1917. I saw that one in theaters and I'm just like, all right, great.
Nothing phases you, man. You're so like chill.
I don't necessarily need the big screen. I need the comfort of I love the comfort of my home and stuff is what I prefer, to be quite honest. And I don't know. This one I was just snuggling up with like the dog while watching this film. So these films actually, because I basically saw them back to back basically. Yeah. I don't know if I would have. I don't know. I mean, the spectacle, the scenes, especially when the tanks get introduced, would have been probably like nice to see on screen because like those tanks looked so intimidating when you first see them, like they're coming out of the smoke and stuff. But other than that, I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, the sequence where they went over the trenches was very well done.
Yeah, there was that one shot where like the tank drives over them, right? And they're like,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
that's fucking terrifying. I guess maybe those scenes would have been cool to watch on screen, but you know, at the same time though, it's a Netflix movie, and I feel like I must enjoy a Netflix movie as Netflix intended on my television.
Well, with that, definitely encourage you guys to check it out and reach out to us and tell us your thoughts. Ways that you can reach out is by emailing us, remakesrebootsurvivals@gmail.com. You could hit us up on our social medias, Instagram @remakesrebootsurvivals, Twitter @remakes_podcast. You can search for us on Facebook and YouTube by searching for Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals. And if you enjoy this podcast, please find us on your podcast listening platform and give us a rating. And if they have the availability of a review, please share your thoughts with us because we do love to hear from you. Yeah, I guess that's it for this week. What are we doing next week?
We don't know.
We don't know. We'll figure it out. It's February. We're going to be taking a break probably come mid-March or something. So, but we'll find stuff. We'll be here for you guys. So, all right. Well, until next time,
stay unoriginal.